to liver your lockdown. I'm here in Guatemala, and we've been here for a few days now, and it's been a blessing to speak with a lot of the Guatemalans, and we've made some new friends over the years within Mortal, Guatemala. And our guest today is Giovanni Fratti, and you are the founder of Immortal Guatemala.
I'm one of the founders.
One of the founders. Okay, so Giovanni is an attorney, correct?
Yes.
And tell us a little bit about yourself. You graduate from the University of Francisco
Marroquin.
Marroquin.
Yes, a private right-wing university that was founded in the 70s while Guatemala was in a civil war with the Marxist guerrillas. And my father and my mother were kind enough to send me there, and I studied their law and graduated in the year 2000 as an attorney, and I've been doing journalism and opinion journalism from the libertarian right-wing point of view since 2005, 2007. So I've been at this about 17 years. It's been a long road, but before I was just an independent journalist by myself, but I have to tell you that the ladies from Guatemala and Mortal have been a blessing for me and my life and the fight that we do, because it's not, as you probably know, it's not the same thing fighting alone, but fighting with a group of fellow people that believe in Christian values and love their country. And we have had such rough times in the last 7, 10 years that this is not possible to do alone. You need to make groups and fight on.
Yeah, you have to find your people.
Exactly.
Right, so we came here about 4 years ago in 2019, and you were having a presidential election at the time.
Yes.
And that's actually how I located you all on Twitter, because I had heard someone on a bullhorn saying, "Ella es un mentirosa," and I had to ask my tia who lives here to stop the car, and I was with Dr. Little, and we heard y'all say Nancy Pelosi is a mentirosa.
Yes.
And I wanted to get out the car so bad. I said,
In
those
front
are
of
my
the
people.
embassy, yes.
There was a lot of you. There was hundreds of Guatemalans,
Yes.
huh?
Yes, back in 2019, we had a major election, which is the case in Guatemala. You know, every 4 years, we change the presidential authority, the Congress authority, and the local authority of the mayors and the cities. And we have all of these elections once every 4 years. And back then, we had the CICIG, which is this United Nations Commission supposedly against impunity, that was basically destroying the Guatemalan justice system. And Nancy Pelosi was instrumental not only in backing this institution, which was a terrible mess for Guatemala, but also in supporting a very bad U.S. ambassador by the name of Todd Robinson that came to place a commissioner of this United Nations Commission called Ivan Velazquez. All of the commissioners were very bad, but this Ivan Velazquez, this Colombian fellow, was probably the worst, and is now actively helping the Petro government and actively helping the drug producers of cocaine in Colombia by not fighting the Colombian drug dealers and not fighting the the cocaine plantations in Colombia. So it was,
I was
very
surprised.
tough years.
We're going to get into a little later and talk about CICIG, but I was surprised to see a lot of the LGBTQP movement flags in Guatemala City, because, you know, my story, I was brought here as an infant, and my mom, who adopted me, is from Guatemala, and so my Guatemalan family is here, and I know that the Guatemalans are very conservative people, right?
Yes, we are 85%, 90% Christian, both Catholic or evangelical, and we are a very conservative society. We have, you know, cultural and religious traditions that go back 500 years, all the way to the Spanish colonial times, and we have a very thriving evangelical movement. We have about 40,000 evangelical churches in Guatemala, and they all keep on growing, you know. So the evangelical Christian movement, together with a lot of American Christian churches, is very strong in Guatemala, and all of these LGBT agenda and, you know, gender ideology agenda and all these far left movements are very anti-ethical, completely opposite to the Guatemalan way of being, the Guatemalan beliefs, the Guatemalan Christian.
That. When I saw those flags, I said, this is not Guatemala. I said, this is America government imposing their government onto the Guatemalans. And that was the first time I had been here in many, many years.
Yeah.
So it was very sad to see that our government is infiltrating Guatemala.
Yes.
And that's the reason for this interview, is that I want to take this back to the United States and share with the people of Louisiana and with the other states, the other 49 states, what our government has done and is doing here in Guatemala City to the Guatemaltecas and against their will. And what can we do as citizens of the United States? Communicating like this allows them to know how corrupt. And what was Nancy Pelosi doing here to begin with? Because the people from the voters don't like her, and she's antiquated and needs to move on.
Yeah, she was together with another group of congressmen, including an Engel guy, which is also a congressman, a Democrat congressman from New York, a very far left congressman, and many others with her, came here to push the Guatemalan government to renew the mandate of CICIG and also to fight for Telma Aldana, which was a Guatemala ex-general attorney lawyer that was in the pockets of the American embassy and doing the American embassy bidding. But you have to take into account that this is not a Republican American embassy, this is a completely far-left Democrat American embassy that I believe I admire very much in the United States. My great-grandfather was a veteran of the First World War fighting for the United States in the beginning of the 19th century. And he came to Guatemala in probably the 30s or the 40s, American Guatemala, and stayed here all his life. So I have relatives in the United States, and I have a lot of relatives and a lot of friends that are pro-Trump in the United States. And we here in Guatemala as conservatives, we look at the Trump movement and the MAGA movement as something that is very close to our values. And we support Trump and people that are like Trump, but we have to also regret that the State Department is basically taken over by the far left ideology. No matter what you do, like Steve Bannon says, and all these people that helped Trump win, the deep state goes beyond the United States in attacking the United States. It also goes abroad, and in the case of Guatemala, it goes abroad with NGOs.
The deep state is around the world. But I think that many countries are wakening up to the deep state, and that's not a conspiracy theory.
No.
It's actually reality. And they're the people that are, puppeteering this show.
Yes.
And
they're multi-millionaires, they have
billionaires.
I mean, we are a small, a group of Guatemalan citizens that are conservative, that are fighting, these NGOs. But believe me, these NGOs easily take more than $100 million a year worth of money to do political activism. Because these NGOs, these far-left NGOs, they say they're here to help the poor people of Guatemala. They're not. They're here to make politics, to advance the far-left agenda, to advance abortion, to advance the LGBTQ agenda, the gender ideology agenda. And they say they are for the poor, they are for the Mayan women, they are for the indigenous people, but that's just, their mouth moving. They're really for a far left agenda, for taking power and to expand the government.
Marxism.
Yes.
Not even
Cultural
socialism.
Marxist, yes.
Worse than socialism.
Yes.
That's right. And so, with that being said, let's talk a little bit about why is the U.S. Embassy supporting a criminal who isn't even an American citizen? And can you tell us about that criminal?
Yes. For instance, in this election, in the current election of 2023 in Guatemala, we have an illegal candidacy. And basically in the second round, we have a first round, and then if you don't get 51% of the votes, you have a second round for the presidential election in Guatemala. This is an election year. But we have a guy that is called Bernardo Arevalo. He's not even a Guatemalan of origin. It's an Uruguayan. He was born in Uruguay, and then he came back to Guatemala. So it doesn't even comply with the Guatemalan constitution that obliges you, if you want to run for president of Guatemala, to be a Guatemalan of origin. This means a Guatemalan that is born in Guatemala, both of Guatemalan parents or in a Guatemalan ship or diplomatic office. The problem with Arevalo is not only that he's not a Guatemalan, he's also a puppet of the State Department and a puppet of the NGOs. They started this criminal fraudulent political party called CENIA, which is C in Spanish, in 2018. And recently it has been discovered by the General Attorney's Office of Guatemala that they've created this party with 5,000 forged signatures. And it was discovered before the elections began.
Is that the Seed Movement Party?
The Seed Movement, yes. And all of this criminal investigation was informed to the Electoral Authority of Guatemala, which is called Tribunal Supremo Electoral. And they chose to let this illegal party run. So they basically, what they did is that they induced to fraud and falsehood about maybe 2 million, close to 2 million voters that went to vote in the second round for this political party. But not only that, but they also run the other political party, which is called UNE, which is a far-left guerrilla movement party in Guatemala, run also in violations of several litigations that were pending against that party. So what we had in Guatemala was the reproduction of the electoral fraud that we have in 2019, reproduced in 2023. And curiously enough, you have the American Embassy, the State Department, the Secretary of State, the Undersecretary of State, and all of these NGOs pushing the Guatemalan authorities to So we have the State Department pushing the Guatemalan authority to declare the election, even though there were several litigations pending after the first round and then after the second round. There is a constant push. We find this very strange. Why is it that the Secretary of State of the United States and even the President of the United States in his Twitter account and the Vice President of the United States and several officers of the State Department are so curious and so involved in the Guatemalan election of this small Central American country, which is a very big Central American country when compared to the rest of Central America, but it is not the main focus of the United States foreign policy. So we always ask this question: why is it that these far-left politicians from the United States are so interested in backing an abortionist and a far-left and an LGBTQ party in Guatemala, and so intent on pushing the election and trying to favor this party against all the other parties? It's not only rude, it's not only illegal to intervene in the Guatemalan election, because nothing in the, for instance, in the Vienna Convention of International Relations allowed the ambassador or this group of ambassadors called the G13 to intervene in Guatemalan elections, but the intent is very clear. The intent is to favor one part of the political spectrum against the other, And we as Guatemalans, we recognize that there is corruption in most political parties. We don't defend corruption in the right or in the left. But it seems to me like for these State Department officials, if the corruption comes from the left, that's all right. But if the corruption comes from the right, then that's condemnable. We believe as a civic group in Guatemala that all corruption should be prosecuted, not just the corruption of one party or the other.
Yeah. Well, are you noticing that a lot of people are actually calling both parties a uniparty in the United States?
Yes.
And that there's really an establishment that may be possibly running these two parties? And so that's why you have a lot of people suggesting that the Republicans do nothing because they do nothing on purpose. And are y'all seeing that?
We're
not getting anything done because they're complacent. They're not being responsible in representing the voice of the people, just as your officials are with the Guatemalans.
We've taken account of an American term in politics that you call them rhinos. They're Republicans all being named, and we have the same thing here with people that call themselves right-wing. They are only right-wing because most of Guatemalans are conservatives, and they think that that's a nice political gesture, but when it comes to Guatemalan politics, they're even worse than the far left. Because, for instance, we have some multi-millionaire Guatemalans that are in some businesses that are mercantilist businesses that back this Semilla movement party, which is completely opposite to all of the Christian values and the conservative nature of the Guatemalan politics.
So it seems that if there's two parties that are being ran by one establishment, then we need to address the establishment to get to the root of the problem and not blame each party, because we know that the two parties, if you don't believe in God and you want to live your life according to the way you want to, a lot of times you vote to the left.
Yes.
But if you have a belief in God, a lot of times those conservatives vote to the right,
Yes.
except for if we, they call them,
Blue dogs.
the blue dog Democrats. Yes, the blue
That are
dog.
against abortion.
Yes,
Mhm.
and that they're for life. And
Sure.
some of those, many of them are believers.
Yes.
And now they're running over to the right. But we're still not doing anything on the right because we have something that Trump brought to our attention, which is the deep state.
Yes.
And so we have to address the establishment and to fix this problem. But this is not gonna happen. The leaders aren't gonna do it. It's gonna be done by the people.
Yes, and you see there are many similarities between what happens in Guatemala and what happens in the United States. For instance, this CICIG thing.
Yes, we're gonna talk about that. So
that was-
let the people know. Tell us what CICIG is.
Yeah, CICIG, it's a commission of the United Nations against impunity that was supposedly being recommended by Guatemalan governments to the United States and to the United Nations to create an entity, which was an international entity. It was not the main stream of the United Nations, but it was neither the Guatemalan government. It was a status quo international entity that was created between the United Nations and the Guatemalan government to illegally and unconstitutionally take over the Guatemalan justice system because there was corruption in the justice system, but the fixture that these leftists did to the justice system became worse than the disease. I mean, the medicine that they tried to give us, which was the CICIG community, the CICIG commission that was in Guatemala for about 11 years, and went the span of 3 different Guatemalan governments and about 2 U.S. administrations, became maybe the worst nightmare that we've ever had in corruption in the judicial system. So, with the excuse of trying to fix some corruption in the justice system and in the prosecutor's office of the Guatemalan government, they created a supranational entity that took over the justice system, took over parts of the Constitutional Court, took over parts of the Guatemalan Supreme Court, took over a major
What
part
are
of
the
the
acronym?
prosecutors.
CICIG.
Yeah, la Comisión Internacional contra la Impunidad en Guatemala. That's what means CICIG
Okay.
in Spanish, which is basically a commission against impunity in Guatemala of a United Nations origin that would not have accountability to anybody. For instance, when Nikki Haley came about 6 years ago to Guatemala and asked this commission to deliver accountability for about $40 million that the US taxpayer gave this commission, and asked this Ivan Velasquez guy, this Colombian drug dealer collaborator now in Colombia, to go to Washington and have accountability for this money, he never showed up. They closed the CICIG and there was never an audit, there was never accountability for about $120 million that they spent, both of the European Union ambassadors, the United Nations, the OAS, and the American taxpayer. And what you had with this superpower that had diplomatic immunity to operate inside the justice system of Guatemala is that you had dead people, you had tortured people in jails, you had false witnesses, false prosecution based on illegal evidence acquainted in a legal way, and many violations not only to the International Charter of Human Rights of the same United Nations, but also violations of the Guatemalan Constitution. So it's always the same with the left. The left says that it wants to fix a problem, or the US government says it wants to fix somebody else's problem outside the United States, and actually what happens is that the problem is made worse by US intervention, and in this case, US intervention together with the United Nations intervention.
So $150 million of American tax-paying
Yeah.
dollars came to.
American and European money, yes.
And European
Yeah,
money
yeah.
came directly to CICIG.
Yes.
And I heard
For
you say
11
something
years.
about they shut that down. Is CICIG still operating?
Yeah, a very brave Guatemalan president called Jimmy Morales that went into office 7 years ago, took the decision to close down this massive violator of Guatemalan institutions and Guatemalan Constitution. But what he got in payback for his express desire to shut down this unconstitutional entity and kick them out of the country is that they got his son and his wife in an illegal prosecution to try to throw them in jail for some Christmas basket that the son of the president sold to one Guatemalan government office. They paid the taxes. They made
Make something up.
yeah, the baskets that they give away for Christmas to
Yes.
the employees. He gave this, he sold this to this entity. He paid his taxes, but they made him seem like he was the biggest criminal for something like I don't know. I think it was $10,000 or $15,000 worth of Christmas baskets. So they tried to find a shame of a prosecution, a fabricated criminal prosecution against the son of the president of Guatemala to try to stop him from kicking out DCC commission. But he did it anyway. And we, as Guatemala Inmortal, and other civic groups and conservative groups in Guatemala, praised him for doing so. And we even made a small street party in front of the DCC office when they were kicked out with, marimbas and Guatemalan flags and all of this, because it was an 11-year dictatorship inside of the Guatemalan government.
Okay, so.
A de facto dictatorship.
So they're closed down.
They closed down, but all the people that back CC are the ones that are back in Semilla now.
So how did the 150 million, was 6 years ago, Nikki Haley came here, is it still operating?
No,
Okay.
Nikki Haley came about 6 years ago and told them that they had to give accountability for this money.
Oh, that had already been
And they never
spent.
did.
Okay, okay.
And she also told this guy, Ivan Velasquez, that he should do as the United States prosecution generally does, which is that you go to a press conference when you have a conviction, not before you have a conviction, when you have people just being arrested. And what they did in Guatemala is that they destroyed the reputations of several Guatemalans, a lot of them innocent people, parading them in front of the media before they had even their first hearing in front of a Guatemalan judge, which is forbidden by Guatemalan law, but the CC people wouldn't care about even nor human rights nor constitutional rights of the accused. And the presumption of innocence.
So a lot of what's happening in America is happening right
Oh,
here.
yes.
And a lot of it is our government that's involved in
Yes.
what's going on.
Taking over the Guatemalan
And
government.
European.
Yes. And European Union, yes.
Unions.
yes,
Okay,
yes.
all right, so, let's talk about this new president that was newly elected.
Yes,
In the Seed Movement Party.
yes.
And, was there fraud in your elections?
Yes, this last election that we had was probably the worst election that we've ever had in 38 years since we became, a functioning democracy after the 1985 new constitution of Guatemala. We had a massive problem of corruption inside the electoral authority. We had also the intent of this electoral authority to contract the Smartmatic company, which is a Soros-founded company that has to do also with the American fraud,
Yes.
Smartmatic and Dominion machines. They wanted to make about $100 million worth of a contract to supplant the citizen-run electoral system of Guatemala, which is very good, with a machine and software-run election. So they explicitly said that they wanted to get rid of the paper ballots in Guatemala, and they wanted to make a machine software-run, computer-run election, which is precisely what they did in all of the rest of Central America and many U.S. states, like Georgia, for instance, in which the Dominion Smartmatic machines were instrumental in making the fraud against Trump. So this electoral authority of Guatemala, that is called the Tribunal Supremo Electoral, wanted to do this corrupt country. We in Guatemala Inmortal have been fighting this corruption inside the electoral authority since about a year ago.
Yeah, that's what this is, huh?
And this is one of the documents that we produced, which is called Electoral Fraud in the 21st Century in Guatemala, which is a document that we made in Guatemala Inmortal to denounce these atrocities against the will of the people. Because now the State Department, I was reading today Guatemala Daily, the State Department is saying that the General Attorney's Office of Doctora Consuelo Porras, which is the General Attorney of the country, is disrespecting the democratic will of the people. What they don't say is that we had an illegal second round, and that we had a second round with this Semilla party, which is an illegal party that was suspended by a judge order before the second round took place. But the electoral authority, which is very corrupt, and is probably in cahoots also with the State Department and this Semilla movement, went ahead with the second round, even though they were notified, officially notified by the Guatemalan Prosecutor's Office that there was a criminal complaint ongoing against this corrupt political party. So the only Guatemalan officials that are doing their job is the General Attorney's Office and the FESI prosecutors, but now the State Department is attacking them and placing them in something that is called the Angles List, which I don't know if you've ever heard of
The
something
Angles
called the
List.
Angles List.
No, I have not heard of the Angles List.
Well, you see, and many Guatemalans haven't either, but this is probably one of the worst stains in the United States international standing, because it's a list of people that are being accused by the State Department with a U.S. Congress law against their reputation and their presumption of innocence. There is about 10 or 12 Guatemalan attorneys that are in this list that have been accused of being corrupt, of being corruption agents, agents of facilitate corruption in Guatemala without due process, without having a day in court, without evidence, but only because the State Department says so. So
anyone can be put on this Angles List in Guatemala
without due process.
without due process.
And their U.S. visas taken away from them as a punishment for being in this list without any crime being proven to them. So this almost looks like a political enemies list, placed by the State Department against these people.
Almost like a terrorist list.
Yes, without
terrorist,
evidence.
yes. It's incredible. This is going on right here right here in Guatemala, but this is also going on in the United States. We don't necessarily have an Angles List, but we have a terrorist list, and they are putting people on the terrorist, like moms.
Yeah, we heard they persecuting.
Speak up against the pornographic librarians are now considered terrorists in America.
And we've heard also, I don't know if you could tell us something about parents being prosecuted by the FBI in the United States, or placed in an investigation for protesting against these books in their schools.
Yes, this is happening, and we were just talking about United States citizens being arrested, and the FBI going into the homes and invading them. And one of the things that are happening right now is one of the January 6ers was arrested. The FBI went into his house and they shut down the computer system, his camera system, everything, so that it couldn't be recorded what they were doing to him. And they went in, they found that he had a safe, and they contacted the owner of the safe, and they got the company who produced the safe, to give them the code. So now, the American patriots are wanting to Bud Light that company, right? And so I think their name is Liberty.
For invading the privacy.
Without a subpoena.
Without a judge order.
A judge order. They just went in and called them and tell us what's the code. They must have had a master code. I'm not too sure about it, but if you follow the Hodges twins, brothers in America, they are actually friends with the January 6er who was arrested. And so they're out there right now telling everyone about it. So that company's about to be Bud Lighted.
Good.
Yeah,
Very
we
good.
need to stand up against this tyranny against our citizens, both in the United States and here in Guatemala. And we need to let the Americans know that our government is against the people, and our government is also against the Guatemalans.
Yes.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about Joe Biden. Did he visit you all recently?
Yes, Joe Biden, when he was vice president of Obama, which we thought the Obama presidency maybe was the worst thing that ever happened in the United States and Guatemala, but now we're proven wrong by Biden's presidency.
Can you imagine?
We are thinking that what Biden is doing with the United States, and I have to tell you this, Martha, we in Guatemala, we are very pro-American. We have, there's about 2 million Guatemalans living in the United States. Billions of dollars come from the United States to Guatemala to remittances that the families that work over there send to Guatemala. We have, the United States cable television, United States music, United States products. We admire the United States, and we have admired American capitalism and American Christianity for decades in this country. And maybe 90% of Guatemalan families have relatives in the United States or have histories in the United States. So it's not a fun thing for us to see such great nation, the nation that has inspired Guatemalan independence in the 19th century, which was inspired by the American Revolution and the American way of life, of freedom, and capitalism and free enterprise, that inspired a lot of Guatemalan patriots to independence, for the independence movement against founding fathers. And now to see this great Christian nation that we admire, that we've admired all our lives, being run down by this Biden guy. For instance, Biden was here in Guatemala about, I think it was 7 years ago, and he came to make the bidding for an American company, it was the Baxter company, that was doing about a $200 million contract with the Guatemalan Social Security institution of the government for dialysis operation, the dialysis medical procedure. And we don't believe that a vice president of the United States should do the bidding of a private company. That's not what the elected officials of the United States are doing. Yeah, exactly. And
That's quid pro quo, Joe.
Exactly. And he also came to force upon the Guatemalan government the renovation of the CICIG entity, which we were talking about earlier.
So this is more corruption from the Biden family.
Oh yes, we believe so. Because this bid that was done for this $200 million contract with the Guatemalan Social Security Agency was an open bid, and there was a lot of honest people such as Max Girin, which was a private sector producer of coffee and a very honest man, by any account. You would ask for about Max Girin references in Guatemala. He was part of the board of that Social Security Agency, and he was thrown in jail without him being committed any crime, together with nurses, together with other members of that board of directors of the Social Security Agency, and some of them even died and committed suicide in preventive prison because of this CICIG entity founded by the Barack Obama government and Joe Biden, and pressured by Joe Biden to be renewed. So this CICIG entity that doesn't only have illegal prostitution in the hand, but they also have the blood of innocent Guatemalans that committed suicide in jail because they couldn't maintain their families, such as Dr. Oliva, because they were thrown in jail. And they didn't commit any crime, and the CICIG entity never demonstrated any crime that they committed, and then after they were dead, they were pronounced innocent by the Guatemalan courts. So the damage that was done to the Guatemalan justice system by these Democrats, especially Biden, and now again Biden as president, and then Biden as vice president, it's something that is deeply offensive to the Guatemalan people, and it's also deeply, it's a source of sadness for us because we admire Americans. We admire American enterprises. We admire American culture. We admire the American fight for freedom.
Well,
and it's not like that anymore with these Democrats.
but we also have to recognize that it's not the American people.
Yes.
And it's not the Guatemalan people.
Yes.
And that we still admire each other.
Yes.
It's the governments.
Yes.
And that's what you and I are doing here,
Yes.
is communicating so that we can let the people know that it's the governments that are
Yes.
against the will of the people. And that we have to continue admiring each other and continue being who we are and loving
Yes.
each other and working together.
Yes.
Because we're gonna get through this. We're gonna win.
Only the citizens will rescue
The
the country.
That's exactly right, and that's where we're at right now. Citizens are standing up, citizens in local communities, even the Guatemalans need to do this, they need to stand up more.
Yes.
The Americans need to stand up more.
Yes.
It's not enough, you're doing a little now, but they need to stand up more and pull together and then show up at these events. Like I was really impressed, 4 years ago when you all pulled all those hundreds of conservative Guatemalans. So we know
Yes.
that the love for the country is there.
Yes,
Yes.
very much.
Yes.
For instance, the history of Guatemala Inmortal is like this. We started as a small citizen group. We have now millions of views in their social media, and we started precisely because this CICIG entity and Todd Robinson, the American ambassador of the Barack Obama government, wanted to reform the Guatemalan Constitution. So we are a bunch of Guatemalan citizens that said, wait a minute, if somebody's gonna reform the Constitution of Guatemala, it's Guatemalans. It's not State Department bureaucrats or Democratic politicians, corrupt politicians that want to impose their will upon the Guatemalan people. And it was for 2 or 3 votes that we were able to stop these constitutional reforms in the Guatemalan Congress. And even though USAID put together about $6 million to push for this reform of the Guatemalan Constitution, we were able to stop it. But it was very hard, Martha. It was very difficult because we are all private citizens. We don't live out of activism. You know, we have families to take care of and businesses and individual entrepreneurs that have, you know, to tend to their business and to tend to their families. And we have to stop doing that and start fighting back as citizens. These huge entities and huge NGOs and multi-million-dollar NGOs, such as the Soros Foundation, the Seattle International Foundation, the
G17 group?
the G13 group,
G13 group.
which is a group of 13 European ambassadors, the American ambassador, Swedish, Spain, Italy, Germany, and the Netherlands, the OAS, the United Nations, that get together to have a pool of money to alter and change Guatemalan politics. Guatemalan politics is supposed to be a Guatemalan business. Even international treaties such as the Vienna Convention on International Relations, of which Guatemala and the United States governments are parts in this convention, prohibit one another to intervene in internal affairs. You don't see Guatemalan ambassadors, you know, opining against who's going to be the next justice of the Supreme Court of the United States or who's going to be the general attorney of the United States, because this would be disrespectful.
Right, so how's our ambassador treating the Guatemalans here?
For instance, we are at the moment, we're prosecuting some corrupt prosecutors that were in this CICIG entity inside of the General Attorney's Office of the Guatemala. And now we have these G13 ambassadors showing up to the court in Guatemala to pressure the judge not to prosecute this Cynthia, her name is Cynthia, I forget her last name, prosecutor that was famous for being a sadist when she was prosecutor and prosecuting children, prosecuting elderly women, she prosecuted a guy for not reporting 200 quetzales worth of some sale. 200 quetzales is not even $20. And also for prosecuting the Bitcoin family, which was another scandal. So if you go into the Liga Pro Patria or Guatemala Inmortal website and you investigate what the CICIG entity did in Guatemala with US taxpayer money, you're going to be ashamed of what the US government is doing in Guatemala, because they say that they want to help Guatemala, they say they want to help the Guatemalan justice system, but what they did is a judicial dictatorship and a destruction of the Guatemalan justice.
We see that happening right now, even with the Seed Movement Party. So
Yes.
I interviewed a couple of Guatemalans on the street, and even our driver, and
Sure.
I asked him what he thought of the new president.
Yes.
And none of them were in favor of the new president.
Yes.
But one of them mentioned to me that our president, Joe Biden, the illegitimate Joe Biden, because we have election fraud.
Sure.
So, but their administration warned the Guatemalan people as to not react or argue against or rise up against this new president,
Yes.
because they would withdraw the funding if they
Yes.
did. Is this true?
Yes. There's been several several distinct forms of pressure against the Guatemalan government and the Guatemalan people from the State Department, which is unheard of. You know, it's almost, it reminds me of the story of Biden in the Ukraine removing the general attorney of Ukraine.
Correct.
It's
That's
almost
right.
the same story,
But
You
he
have-
said, well, SOB,
Yeah,
and he did it.
Yeah, they have you have these foreigners disrespecting international conventions and international treaties that oblige them not to mingle in internal affairs,
That's correct.
coming to Guatemala to say, don't prosecute this corrupt attorney, don't go against the crimes of this corrupt political party, don't investigate what CICIG did in Guatemala. And so we start to doubt if whether or not these U.S. Officials have something to do with this corruption, because they're so intent on covering it or not investigating the corruption of CICIG, not investigating the corruption of the Guatemalan prosecutor's office that was working with CICIG. We are starting to doubt if they were not also part of the corruption of these international entities in Guatemala.
Well, it's good to hear this because it all kind of goes along with what you're talking about. There's plenty of corruption. This is just more corruption that we,
Yes.
the people, are finding out that's
Yes.
happening
With
right
taxpayer
now
money.
with our taxpayer
Yeah.
money. So we'll just add this to the list as to what quid pro quo Joe and his administration has been doing. They've been extorting Guatemala, Guatemalans. Yes,
And trying to impose. Imagine such a country, Marta, imposing Guatemalan justices, imposing on Guatemalan prosecutors, imposing now on a Guatemalan president, so that they will control the courts, or they will control the prosecutor's office, and now they want to control the president's office. And there is about 14 corrupt Guatemalan runaways from justice, from the Guatemalan justice system, exiled in Washington at the moment, by the State Department people, such as Todd Robinson, such as Blinken, such as Biden, that are giving asylum to Guatemalan corrupt functionaries and officials, and giving them asylum in the United States. Why is this so? Why they say in one hand that they want to better the justice system, when the justice system prosecutes corrupt officials, they give asylum to corrupt officials from Guatemala? These contradictions are very puzzling and very disconcerting to us Guatemalans, because with one side of their mouth they say they want to better the Guatemalan prosecutor's office, and with the other side of their mouth they're giving asylum to corrupt officials that abused their power when CICIG was here and are now having asylum in the United States. It's unbelievable.
It is unbelievable. So another question that I have is one of the questions that I asked the Guatemalans here, if they knew much about this new president.
Yes.
And I was told multiple times, I think 3 times, by 3 different Guatemalans, that they did not know much about him.
Yes.
And they didn't even know that he was in
Congress. Yes.
In Congress, a congressman.
Well, I'll tell you something else about the story of Semilla. Semilla was started illegally with illegal signatures and forged signatures and illegal money, because they stole about 60,000 euros, which is about 70 or 75,000 US dollars, from the Dutch Cooperation Agency, which is forbidden by Guatemalan law. Guatemalan law prohibits foreign money to fund political parties. It's forbidden in the Guatemalan electoral law. Semilla at the moment is being prosecuted for stealing 60,000 euros of this Dutch Cooperation Agency to start the party, to found the party. And there are also some of the members of Semilla that are being accused of stealing about 120,000 US dollars from USAID in Guatemala. So this is the Cooperation Agency of the United States attached to the State Department that operates in Guatemala. Another member of Semilla, which is called Lucrecia Hernandez Mac and Helen Mac, stole money, a relative from Helen Mac stole money from the USAID office in Guatemala, and this money magically come to the Semilla party to start this party together with these 60,000 euros. So the Semilla movement not only started illegally with forged signatures, but also with stolen money. And so now you have the State Department doing the political bid of this party and telling Guatemalan prosecutor not to prosecute the forged signatures? Why? Why is it that they're so interested in backing up and covering and pushing for this party? I'll tell you why. Because they defend the LGBT agenda, because they defend the gay marriage, because they are a creature of the international cooperation in Guatemala, an illegal creature because Guatemala forbids foreign money to fund political parties, and because a lot of the people that back CICIG are the ones that created this party in order to try to come back from exile, these 16 Guatemalans that are run away from justices in Guatemalan justice system, to bring them back from Washington back to Guatemala to keep on doing this dictatorship that they have with CICIG. So for us, it's not a surprise.
Send us the 16 people
Yes.
in an email so
Yes.
we can release that too.
Yes, we will.
Let the people know who they are. It sounds a lot like Burisma board in the whole Ukraine
Yes.
thing, doesn't it?
Yes.
I wonder how many other nations have this is spawned. I mean, if it's happening in the United States,
And
it's
in
happening
Ukraine.
in Ukraine, it's
And
happening in
Guatemala.
Guatemala. I mean, we have to find out how many other nations
Yes.
that,
And like Marco Rubio said in some of the protests for the Bitko family, which are some Russian citizens that are exiled from prosecution for Putin in Guatemala, you should have to push for an audit of USAID money. You should very strongly in the United States ask for an audit of this money, especially of the money that USAID gave to the CICIG entity because I bet you, if you make an audit, you will find that this money are not spent legally and are spent, for instance, in corrupt journalists, in corrupt judges, in corrupt politicians to make the bidding of the State Department in Guatemala.
There's a lot to be cleaned up,
Yes.
a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, even in the judicial system, we
Yes.
see the corruption, the deep state, where the judges are not helping the parents, they're not helping the people, they're
And
in
I
cahoots
believe
with
they're
the
even-
media.
And I believe they're even prosecuting Trump now, isn't it?
They are.
For him not to run in
For
being the
development,
Allies. Uh-huh.
yes.
Why is it, why do you think is this in the United States?
They don't want him to win the 2024 election.
So it's a political
It's a
prosecution.
political prosecution, that's exactly correct, but it's backfiring on them because the more they indict him, the more the people rise up.
Sure.
He's now pulling over from the left to the right. He now has a strong black vote.
And even
There.
Latino, isn't it?
Latinos have come over now. So, them opening up the border illegally is backfiring on them.
Sure.
Because they didn't bank on the fact that the voters that they are allowing to vote illegally, by the way,
Sure.
because they're not American citizens.
Sure.
So they thought they were gonna vote for them because they let them in. But these Latinos aren't stupid. And
And
they're
a lot of them are
God
conservatives.
fearing people with morals. You open the border, you let them go there. For them, they're crossing legally because you
Sure.
opened it,
Sure.
right?
And they're fleeing the communism in their countries. They're not
Yeah.
going to go vote communist when once they're in the United States, like Venezuela and Cuba, they vote for the right.
Right,
Mhm.
so it's gonna backfire on them because the
God
Guatemalans.
witness.
Yes, exactly. So is there anything else that you would like to say to the
Yeah.
American people?
Yeah, I believe that American politics, it's complicated just as Guatemalan politics is complicated, but I've seen a revival in the United States. And I'm very glad, for instance, of this movement that Donald Trump led and some other conservative group led, and the great triumph of abolishing the abortion at the federal level in the Supreme Court. I am an admirer of this pro-life movement in the United States that fought for more than 50 years to change that ruling, that completely preposterous ruling of the United States of Roe versus Wade for more than 40 years. I think that's one of the things that inspire us Guatemalans, the conservative movement, of the right-wing movement in Guatemala. I salute the United States and Donald Trump and all the people that back Donald Trump for reversing that abortion ruling of the Supreme Court. And I also praise the MAGA movement. I've seen, the rallies, I've seen
That means make America great again.
exactly.
There's nothing strange about that,
Yeah.
or cultish.
Exactly.
It means
Yeah.
make America
It's a citizen
great
movement.
again. It's a citizen movement.
And I've seen how a lot of, like you said, black people, Latino people, conservative people are rising up. They're going to fight the fight, the good fight. Legally, frontally. In a very brave way against the left. And I've also seen a lot of Democrats being disenchanted by the Democratic Party and these far left policies. I think also in the other side, there's a lot of Christian-fearing people that don't see themselves represented by the Democratic Party and are fleeing the Democratic Party. And I think, God willing, God will let Trump win in 2024. And we are rooting for Trump in the next November 2024 elections, because we know that with Trump in office, a lot of this invasion of Guatemala by the State Department and the deep state will stop, or at least will be diminished in a lot of ways. And,
But we're hoping that he actually addresses the deep state
Yes.
next go round. There was so much for him.
it's a tough
It
fight.
was-
Yes,
It was a lot. I think the people needed to be,
realistic. Yes.
no one knew.
Yeah.
And most people didn't know. And when you start to expose this stuff, immediately the left
Yeah.
calls you up.
A conspiracy theories, yes.
Exactly.
And with us.
Well,
Yes.
it is a conspiracy. It's
Yeah.
no longer a theory.
Of them against the American people. Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
And even the Muslim community is rising up.
Yes.
And so it's interesting because being a citizen journalist, I've come to know that, we have a huge Muslim community. And they pitted the American people against the Muslims in
Yes.
the 60s and 70s.
Yes.
And now all of that's coming out.
Yes.
That it was
They
the
want to impose the
government.
LBTG agenda on the Muslims. Are very
They
conservative.
are not
Yes.
having
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
movement. They
Yes.
are not having it.
Even in Muslim countries.
That's
with the
right.
American money.
That's right. So that agenda, the government it's the LGBTQ, I say P2 because I add the pedophilia in there. That movement is developed from the government.
Yes.
Even the gays, the people who live gay lives, many of them don't want to be involved in the LGBTQ.
And they don't want people indoctrinating children.
That's exactly right. And many of the gays stand against the transgenderism, the mutilation of children.
Yes, yes.
Many of them don't want you reading inappropriate books
Sure.
to 2 and 3 and 4-year-olds,
Sure.
where a kid can go grab a book in first grade and it teach them things that they should have no business even seeing it because it
without the consent of the parents.
Well, it takes them, they're innocent, they're little innocent lives. It's abuse.
Yes,
It's child
abuse.
abuse.
Yes, I 100%.
And so the Muslims are standing up, and I applaud them for that. And I pray they continue to do that.
Yes.
And the citizens are fighting strongly, and so we're with the Guatemalan people. We're with you,
Thank you very
and
much.
we're going to continue to fight with you, and we're going to do our best. There is a gentleman that is running for Secretary of State in Louisiana. His name is Brandon Trosclair, and he has a website, www.letsgobrandon.net.
That's pretty good.
But it's go, Geaux, as in the French go for Louisiana. Okay? And he is winning in Louisiana because we know that Soros backed all of the Secretary of State positions throughout the United States.
And general attorneys,
And
prosecutors,
general attorneys,
yes.
exactly. And many of the judgeships too, right?
Yes.
It's all Soros funded money.
Yes.
So in
All these prosecutors are prosecuting Trump now. Most of them
They
are
are.
Soros funded.
They are, and even some of the judges that Trump put in were deep state that
Sure.
he did not know.
Sure.
But they're exposing themselves. And so we're going to fight for, we're going to get this Brandon Trosclair in there. And then you let the Guatemalans know in Louisiana
Yes.
for us
For sure.
that
Yes.
for them to vote for Brandon Trosclair for Secretary of State.
Of course.
Very critical, because Brandon Trosclair is the only candidate that is going to go to paper ballots and remove the machines.
Exactly.
That way, because they've already proven, there's a report called the Haldeman Report. I sent that to your team, and that Haldeman report proved that there were 13, I believe, deficiencies in the Dominion machines, which are related to the Smartmatic which you have,
Sure.
right?
And the
Exactly.
Soros Foundations.
They most certainly can be hacked,
Of course.
100%.
Of course.
And so what?
And alter the results.
Alter the results and switch votes from one party to the other, which we saw that happen with Trump in the middle of the night.
In
Right.
Georgia, in
It's
Wisconsin.
happening on local levels too. But we never knew that it was happening.
Arizona, maybe.
Arizona, yeah, that's right. And so we are excited to get Brandon Trosclair in there, so that he can take over that and get rid of that process, because, we're Christians, and there is a prophecy that has spoken that the Mississippi River the original name is the Holy Spirit River. And out of the mouth of the river, through the Louisiana Purchase, will birth a revival, which I believe you said earlier, there is a revival happening.
Yes.
And it is the
Of
way
citizenship of Christians, of Christian moms, Christian dads, defending their faith.
pulling together,
Yeah.
defending their faith, because if you don't stand up right now for the
Yes.
Lord, those Christians we're being persecuted already, but we must do this.
And they're being prosecuted in all of Latin America. For instance, in Chile, they were burning Catholic churches, and in Mexico, this far-left feminists attack, the cathedral in Mexico, in Guatemala also, they're attacking both Catholic churches and evangelical churches, Protestant churches. So it's not a conspiracy, Michael. You're completely right. It's not a conspiracy. We're not making it up. It's happening in the fields. It's happening in the cities, and we have to fight it back.
Right, so there's another one, so we have a situation right now where Trump is backing establishment for our gubernatorial race, okay? Trump doesn't know that he's establishment. But there is a candidate who's not establishment, and his name is John Schroeder.
Of Louisiana.
Of Louisiana, okay? So this man must win the gubernatorialship. He's a man of God, and he will give the power back to the people. So it's the opposite. We cannot follow this Trump endorsement in Louisiana for governorship, because he is establishment. We don't want Jeff Landry, the establishment. We want John Schroeder for governor. Because he will give the power back to the people. So that's another race that we need to, let the Guatemalans know.
Yes.
John Schroeder for governor, that way the Louisiana power is given back to the people. He will not receive special interest donations from donors. He will not play the pay-to-play game. He's already spoken against it.
Like the corrupt Obama Chicago machine.
Yes, because the Republican establishment is equally as corrupt as the left wing, because they're in this together. So we have to get out of the machine.
Yes.
And vote for independent,
real Republican, real Christian candidates.
John Schroeder's a real Republican. He's a man of God, a man of faith. He's a man for the people. And so it's important that we let the Guatemalans know to back John Schroeder for governor of Louisiana. And then, there's other candidates that we are supporting that we know that are not establishment. Billy Nungesser for lieutenant governor. We have a state treasurer who may be, we're still debating if this guy is establishment, but we do know him and we do like him, and so we're still looking at the treasurer's race to determine if the guy, the gentleman.
This is for the state government.
For the state government, Louisiana. Because Louisiana is critical. We need to get the education system corrected.
Yes.
Okay? It's important. And they are doing like, Guatemala, your public schools end at 1:00?
Sure. So, some of the public schools at 1:00, but there's also an afternoon program which is around 3 or 4.
Okay, yes, that's what Dr. Little's on one of those boards of the programs. So, but we need to get the people to understand that it's critical to bring Louisiana from 47, 48, 49 in education and in the things of Louisiana, because they are going to be the leader in the other 49 states. And so once we focus on this state, we believe that the other states are going to, the conservative states, we're not sure what's going to happen with the blue liberal states.
Sure.
But it's important that we do that.
Martha, I'm so grateful, to have met you. I'm so grateful for you and your organization to be as active as you've been. We follow you on Twitter, we follow you on Facebook, we follow you on your social media, and I think you're a beacon for the freedom fighters, for the people that fight for traditional Christian values. And we in Guatemala and Mortal, which is our organization, are so happy and so grateful to meet you, and you're an inspiration to us. And we wanted to say thank you for all your hard work.
Well, thank you so much. A little bit about my story, but we're going to keep fighting for the Guatemalans. My adopted mother is from Guatemala, and I have a heart for the Guatemalans. And I believe that was, ordained by the Lord. And here we are fighting together. We're going to win. We're going to win. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. God bless you.
All right.
Thank you so much.